East of the country, Russia's defense ministry confirms the airstrikes, saying they killed 62 Syrian soldiers. The U.S. Central Command says its forces did not intentionally target Syrian troops, also promising to look into the situation and saying lessons will be learned from this. Plus, video appears allegedly showing U.S. commandos fleeing a Syrian town under a barrage of abuse hurled at them by American-backed rebels. Sean Thomas, glad to have you with us. We start with breaking news on RT International. The U.S. coalition has carried out airstrikes on the Syrian army, which have killed 62 people. This is according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. RT's Paula Slier has the latest.
The Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed that U.S.-led coalition planes attacked Syrian forces after entering Syrian airspace from the Iraqi border. We're hearing that there were 4 strikes, 62 Syrian soldiers were killed and 100 were injured. This position of the Syrian military was surrounded by Islamic State. So after the strikes, Islamic State militants were able to advance forward. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry is saying that even if this attack was carried out because of false coordinates, what it does show is the consequences of the United States' unwillingness to cooperate with Russia on locating targets and coordinating anti-terror efforts.
Let's hope further. I'm joined by Igor Zhdanov. Thank you very much for being with us here. After the cessation deal was reached, do you think that the U.S. and Russia are still lacking cooperation, or is there still a path forward?
Well, Sean, for me, this latest piece of news about the American airstrike, it does come as a bit of a shocker, because I was actually on duty in the newsroom breaking the story about how Russia and the U.S. reached that deal. So when Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry announced that the deal had finally been reached, it did look like a breakthrough. It did look like Russia and the U.S. were on the right track to cooperation. And honestly, me and the whole team in the newsroom, we felt somewhat of a relief, really, because it did take so long. It did take so long for that deal to happen, really. And Lavrov and Kerry, over the course of the latest months, they would make dozens of private conversations trying to sort out the Syria peace problem, really. And their meetings dedicated to resolving that particular problem solely would last for more than 10 hours in certain cases. And while that was happening, there was a certain choir of voices, I'd say rather hawkish voices in Washington, suggesting that cooperating with Russia was not really in the best interest of Washington. Let's have a listen.
I've said before that we believe Russia has the wrong strategy. Despite what the Russians say, we have not agreed to cooperate with Russia.
As you know, we are not coordinating on a military-to-military basis with the Russians. That has not changed.
Now, I was in the newsroom with you when that deal was brokered, and I just remember that sense of relief, and there was a very big sense of hope.
It was big. Because that piece of news in particular, it was big, because it did look like a lot of people didn't even believe that was happening, because some sources were suggesting that the deal was going to be postponed one more time. And there's really a perfect explanation for that skepticism, really, because Russia and the U.S., they do differ on many things on Syria, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it does seem that the U.S. government has its own view on Syria, or their own agenda, if you will, when it comes to the country of the civil war there.
When it comes to to cornerstones of diplomacy, Russia works with the Syrian government, and Russia works with the Syrian army, and they coordinate their strikes with the Syrian army. The U.S. is really coordinating with the opposition. And I'd say they hit a few walls with that. It didn't always work out as it was planned for Washington, really. And Deir ez-Zor in particular, it does spell bad luck for the United States, because this airstrike, and if it confirms to be true that the United States did hit the Syrian army garrison or something, it won't be the first time the Syrian army, it is not the first time the Syrian army is accused of hitting the Syrian army in that particular province. Let's see.
Interesting.
The strategy that we are using now, airstrikes, special forces, and working with local forces who are fighting to regain control of their own country, that is how we'll achieve a more sustainable victory.
Well, you can see for yourself, not the first time, and so this airstrike coming at a very sensitive time. So the United Nations Security Council meets in about, well, I guess in about half an hour's time, maybe even less. That's when it's scheduled to meet. So let's hope that something productive comes out and the whole international community will get back on this track of cooperating again when it comes to Syria, really.
Yeah, hopefully we can get some diplomacy involved through the UN Security Council meeting.